It's the Inside Scoop Virginia, all the news Virginians want to know. Now here's the host of Inside Scoop Virginia, George Berg.
Actually, it's Mark Levine, the host of the Inside Scoop, all the news the government does not want you to know. And I'm here to tell you that New Year 2008 is around the corner. It's coming in just a couple of weeks. And after that, you better be ready because things come fast and furious. 2 days after the new year is the Iowa caucuses, quickly followed by the New Hampshire primary. 2 weeks after that, the Super Bowl. What does the Super Bowl have to do with the Iowa caucuses, New Hampshire primary? A lot. So says author A.F. Cook. She's the author of Democrats in the Red Zone, an independent voter's take on the game of political perception. A.F. Cook, Ann Cook, who's sitting here, is my guest today, and she argues basically that the Democrats, they got their values right, but they don't have their perception right. Their issues may be things that voters want to vote for, but they're not reaching out to the regular guy. I don't know, when I read Ann's book, I think of the guy sitting on the couch, popping open a Budweiser and watching the football game and not really reacting to John Kerry or Nancy Pelosi. I don't know if that's a fair perception, but I do want to welcome you, Ann Cook, to the Inside Scoop. So let me start with that. Is that who we're trying to reach, the guy sitting on the couch, popping open a beer and watching the football game?
Well, it doesn't just have to be guys, first of all. They don't all have to drink beer. They can be sitting in the bleachers as well as on the comfortable couch. But no, I'm really talking about, let's say, around the 5 to 10% of voters that determine elections. Independents, potential crossover Republicans, Democrats who just feel that the Democratic Party hasn't really shown enough vigor.
The people you call the audience that matters. Who is the audience that matters?
People like me, people like my boyfriend, people like guys and women that I talk to all over the place.
Regular guys.
Regular people, people who don't want to have policy. They don't want to be hit over the head with policy. They just want to know if you're somebody they could be comfortable with. You know, the whole situation where Kerry in 2004 wasn't perceived as the kind of neighbor you would want, and George Bush was. Why was that?
Well, we'll talk about why that is. Let me just ask you, first of all, though, what does politics have to do with football? I mean, one's sports, one's politics. Democrats in the red zone. What's the red zone? I mean, okay, it's the last 20 yards, right? What does that have to do with politics?
Well, it's not the last 20 yards. It's in my book, the political red zone are issue areas of race and morality that cause the Democrats the biggest problem, scoring points with the American public. So their assumptions about what the public believes about race, morality, and all those issues, cultural issues, get them into trouble. They don't know how to convey their message appropriately because they seem to make assumptions about what their audience believes that are incorrect.
Well, these are famously called wedge issues. They're the issues that politicians use, particularly Republicans have used a lot in the last 2 decades or so, to wedge differences among Democrats, to try to separate Democrats. And you're right, they tend to be issues of race and sex and sexual orientation and the kind of thing. Are you asking Democrats to change their positions or just their perceptions or both?
I want Democrats mainly to change their rhetoric. I want them to change their language, and I want them to change their image rhetoric.
Give me some examples.
Well, I don't want them to use words like Orwellian, which John Kerry used in the debates in 2004, and which I think went flying over a lot of people's heads.
Is not this administration Orwellian?
Maybe, but how many people are going to understand what that means? You're assuming that people have read George Orwell's Animal Farm,
1984.
1984, and remember from their high school reading what that was about.
So what should he say? Okay, you're rewriting for John Kerry. He wants to make the point that this is an administration that is, war is peace, freedom is strength. It's using language in inappropriate way. What would you say? I'm putting you on the spot here.
I know. Well, you're not giving me time to write.
It's not easier to give it in one word.
You're not giving me time to write him a speech. I mean, the professionals really should know how to do this. But really, you should start off by getting rid of words like Orwellian.
How about a very simple word?
Sure.
They're lying to you. Now that conveys Orwellian. It's a little more simple. It's a little more direct. It's a little harsher. Is that too harsh?
The problem is, I think that, this is going to sound very strange, but I think that pretentiousness bothers voters more
when you
than
say
dishonesty.
Someone's lying to you, is that pretentious?
I think it's very subjective. Anybody can say, oh, they're lying to you. How do you know?
Well,
It's
you
very
go and you give the
subjective.
facts. You say, look, they're lying to you. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There weren't weapons of mass destruction. They're lying to you.
You know what? If somebody comes up to me on the street and says, this person lied to you, but I don't like the person that's telling me that, I think they're arrogant, or I think they're stiff, or I think they're somehow rude, I'm not really going to want to listen to what they have to say, even if it's the right thing.
So how do you get away from being seen as arrogant? Here it is, you have a whole bunch of policies Republicans are doing that are wrong or unconstitutional or lies or in other ways hurting people. And I want to tell someone, this guy's hurting you, but I don't want to come off as condescending. I don't want to come off as arrogant. I want to say, hey, this guy's hurting you. Do I give examples? Do I talk about, Joe Smith, who lives in Arkansas and he can't have health care because of Bush's policies? Is that how I do it?
No, I actually think instead of telling them why you're right, I think you should ask them what they think first. First, ask voters, is this what the kind of country that you want? Is this what you want? Because this is what these guys are doing. And this is how it affects you directly. Don't tell me about the deficit, the big scary deficit, and not tell me how it's going to affect me. I mean, Tom Daschle used to get up and make pronouncements about the deficit all the time, and me, just regular American voter.
Yeah, but he was making those on the Senate floor. He wasn't trying to reach out to Americans.
Well, or to a press conference. Well, the Senate floor is covered by C-SPAN. We're supposed to be there witnessing it. I think a lot of senators who were out there tend to sound too much like they're speaking to a C-SPAN camera.
But isn't some of this elitist in yourself? You're saying Americans don't understand George Orwell. They don't understand 1984. Education's not good enough. So aren't we talking down in a sense by talking more simply?
I don't think it's talking down. I think plain language is something that I think it's actually harder to speak plainly if you're extremely well educated. I think a lot of people who are extremely well educated place their education and their intellect above basic interactions, being able to basically sort of communicate with people. And I don't think it's talking down. I think you use the game clock more efficiently when you use shorter sentences, plain language, and people have limited amount of time in which to listen to politicians go on and on and on. So it's really time management, it's clock management, like, in a game.
Here's my problem. And I see Republicans doing this, well, they're Democrats, I'll grant you that. And I see things that Rush Limbaugh says that are very simple and quite wrong. I heard Bill O'Reilly just the other day. In fact, some guy was calling in and he was talking about Democratic policies on health care and Social Security and so forth. And Bill O'Reilly said, well, the Democrats, they may help you in the short run, but in the long run, you're out of a job. And then he just went right on. Now, he gave no connection, no explanation why the person was out of a job. I wanted to call in and say, hey, Bill O'Reilly, in the 1990s under Bill Clinton, not only did the rich get richer, but the middle class got richer, the poor got richer. In the O's, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, the middle class get poorer. Now that's a mouthful, and yet it explains that he's wrong, that in the long run, the guy calling in loses a job. How do we convey messages that are inherently complex in a way that doesn't be seen as talking down to people?
I think that's real art, and I think that's why watching football, hanging out with football fans.
What would a football fan say?
About
anything, the deficit, say, or anything else. How would you convey it in football terms?
Well, I'm not sure I would start with the deficit as an issue anyway.
How about massive debt? Does that cause it? Running up your credit cards. Does that might fit the average listener?
But I'll tell you something. A lot of average the audience that matters. These people, the audience that matters, are traditionalists. They believe in paying their bills, taking care of business, being law-abiding, being courteous, all of these things. And the only thing about the debt stuff is that a lot of audience that matters, you could see this in terms of the bad loans, that the whole issue with the bad loans for houses. The way that was framed by the subprime mortgages, the way it was framed by people like Rush Limbaugh or someone who stood in for him on his show that day was that the people that actually bought into those subprime loans were just too dumb to get it. So a lot of people feel that you should be responsible enough not to get yourself into debt in the first place.
And yet the interesting thing about the Bush plan on the subprime mortgages, and I've studied it, is basically, bankers, very wealthy bankers, convince people who can't afford it to get loans that they can't afford. The people get the loans and go belly up. And who does Bush help? the bankers.
It's extremely
It helps
immoral.
the bankers. It doesn't help the person who's hurt. You could argue that no one should be helped. I understand that argument. But to say that the person who has lost their home and is living in the street shouldn't be helped, but the bank who convinced them to take the bad loan, they should be helped. I mean, that seems to me kind of backwards.
I want to know where the Democrats were when the subprime loan business was gearing up. Where were they? Because nobody warned people about this stuff or what happened. At least I didn't hear it. I didn't feel that anybody was warned. And, basically, though, as far as the fallout from it, we need to be told why that was immoral, why that policy on Bush's part or on the part of the Republicans to support subprime mortgage lenders who are being unethical, why that's immoral. Make that a morality issue.
So you have basically a commercial that says, here's the banker, he was lying to you, he got you to put your home in hock at 23%, whatever interest rates, and now these people are out of a home.
Tell the audience that matters how people who have suffered from bad subprime loans, how that market is going to negatively affect them, and then you might start to get some traction.
Well, let's talk about how it affects them. I mean, when we have any policy, the war in Iraq, for example, okay, we've spent $1 trillion on this war. Now, there are people that, will talk about whether the war was justified or anything else, or certainly people in the military, it affects them to a great extent. It affects our veterans. But the audience that matters, as you put it, perhaps isn't serving in Iraq. They're sitting at home. How does it matter to them? Well, they're going to have to pay huge amounts of taxes for the next 2 decades to pay for this war that George Bush doesn't want to pay for now. That would hit them in the pocketbook. They'd understand that, wouldn't they?
I think so.
But the Democrats aren't making that message.
Well, the problem is they didn't get enough seats in Congress to really push their agenda on Iraq, from what I understand, and they've been wringing their hands about it. But the fact is, I think the Democrats rely too much on luck. The Republicans have to mess up in some way. They have to have scandals with, the likes of Mark Foley, Ted Haggard. The Republicans had this incredible perfect storm of scandal, which is highly unusual for Republicans to experience, as well as people deciding after they reelected George Bush in 2004, a couple of years later deciding, oh, actually, we don't want to stay in this war anymore, and then started to vote for Democrats. But the Democrats benefited, in my view, from, the unpopular war, from some of these scandals, and they shouldn't have to rely on that kind of luck. In terms of their game plan.
Let's talk about who, specifically, the audience that matters, and that's a term you use a lot in your book, the audience that matters. And they matters because they're the swing vote, right? These are people who don't normally necessarily vote for Democrats or Republicans. They're the 20% of America in the middle, if you will, if 40% of us are with each party. Is that fair?
Well, I have to say, it's not just them. I know a lot of Republicans that are waiting for a Democrat they feel they can vote for comfortably.
Who is that? Bill Clinton was one of them, right? I mean, they voted for him. He had an approval rating of 66% when he left office.
When he left office,
right? Not
when he came in.
No.
Okay. Mark Warner actually was somebody I think would have been a really, really good
former
presidential
governor of
candidate.
Virginia.
Yeah, NASCAR dads liked him. Hunters
But see, now
liked
that's
him.
interesting. Mark Warner, who didn't come from a blue-collar background that I understand, went down to Southwest Virginia, attended some NASCAR races, and people fell in love with him. Can anybody do that?
Show up at the right place at the right time.
Could Michael Dukakis, he went in the tank, could he have gone down and seen the race car drivers in Southwestern Virginia and have blue-collar workers come to him the way Mark Warner did?
Michael Dukakis, very intelligent man. My father worked with him a long time ago on the Advocates. He was a very...
but could he play the blue-collar guy that Mark Warner did?
He didn't.
So you think he maybe could have? You think that that's open to anyone?
You have to think that it's important to do that in order for it to happen. If you think that being intellectual and you're too important to do that kind of thing, then you're going to lose the buy-in of the guy voters of America.
The question for me, though, is how much of this is perception? How much of this is reality? How much will voters see it as fakery? I want to answer that question when we come back. If you want to join in the discussion, please join us. The toll-free number, 888-488-MARK, local number 571-749-1166. We'll be right back after this.
This is Mommy's bed.
Okay.
Me and Jenny were jumping on it.
Quick, huh? 15 minutes? Just
Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
If you give me a fish, If you give someone a fish,
you feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last couple.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, mister. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Line it up, baby. Come on.
Good.
Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I do hope you call in. There's actually a controversial issue here because what I plan to go over with author A.F. Cook is whether or not some of these perceptions that she's asking Democrats to do may be seen as fake. I want to know what you think, too. Toll-free number 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. The local number on your screen, 571-749-1166. Okay, Ann. In the 2004 election, I remember John Kerry went hunting. Do you remember this? He went out duck hunting, and he was panned by everybody. Oh, John Kerry, you don't go duck hunting. He's like, no, I used to hunt as a kid. No, you don't. And I don't know whether it's because he's a liberal or because he's a Democrat, or they just don't think he went duck hunting very often. He tried to do what you described Mark Warner is doing very successfully. Mark Warner went to the NASCAR games. Now, I don't know, maybe you know, I don't know whether Mark Warner followed NASCAR prior to him running for Virginia governor. It's a good question, I don't know. But when Kerry went duck hunting, which is similar, he got panned. What did Kerry do wrong that Warner did right?
Well, unfortunately, I think Kerry was the wrong quarterback for the.
So Kerry couldn't have done it. He couldn't have been the blue collar guy that you want to see. Not you. The audience that matters wants to see in the Democratic Party.
Kerry, to me, was a statesman, and it would have just done him better to stick to that. It still wasn't my ideal go-to guy for the presidency. You know, Howard Dean was who I supported originally.
Because he had passion, because he had personality, which clearly more than John Kerry had. Is that why?
He was down to earth. I think he had more credibility with gun owners, being a Vermont governor, with helping pass civil unions. He didn't get, that would have maybe neutralized the gay marriage push a bit, the fact that he supported civil unions, which wasn't quite gay marriage. But the problem is some of his tapes didn't get checked by the campaign staff, so some of his former remarks came back to bite him. I think, at least for me as a voter, I watched that and I said, you guys are going to go up against Karl Rove. You better have some discipline as far as having a rebuttal for your former statements. So by the time the scream came around.
Which former statements are you referring to?
I think he sort of panned the Iowa caucus process earlier, and that they didn't have a rebuttal for that. Apparently.
Yeah, you can't attack Iowa, even if you... Now, the sad thing is, and I've said this on this show, I guess I can't run for president, folks, but I said on this show that I think it's wrong that Iowa and New Hampshire always get to go first. I mean no disrespect to the people of Iowa and New Hampshire, but heck, I want to give other states a chance. I mean, we're all supposed to be equal here in America. What if he said something like that? That's still not good enough, right? Because Iowa and New Hampshire voters will say, no, we want to be first. We've been first for 50 years.
Well, I mean, really, we should all be voting the same day. And our voting day should be a national holiday, too. So.
But if you say that, aren't you making Iowa and New Hampshire voters mad? Here's my problem with what you're saying. You're talking about Howard Dean's positions on gun control, and that's fine. I want to distinguish between perception. I mean, your book says independent voters take on the game of political perception and reality. It seems to me that part of what you're saying is that Democrats have to modify their positions and not just their perception. You're saying that Howard Dean was credible on guns because he supported, the NRA in Vermont, and John Kerry didn't. That's a question not of perception, but of actual politics.
I think what's important is how they talk about which issues and which target audience they're focused on. If they focus on their liberal base, they're going to run into trouble in the general election. I think they need to focus more of their language on the target audience, which I call the audience that matters. So they need to moderate some of their language. They need to find words and ways of framing things. Some of these issues that are polarizing, like gay marriage, abortion rights, they need to find out with those constituencies that support them where the values inherent in those fights dovetail with the concerns of the voting majority.
Okay, let's talk about the right of gay people to marry, because you devote a whole section of it in your book. You said that Howard Dean was actually more credible to voters because he passed civil unions in Vermont. Now, John Kerry, as I know you know, but maybe our listeners may have forgotten, did not support the equal right of gay people to marry. He supported civil unions just like Howard Dean. They had the same position. How could Howard Dean come away with a better perception?
Well, Howard Dean never had to face the general election because he didn't get there. So the gay marriage push picked up steam as the general election got closer, and also Republicans and conservatives really made a case, of course, because the evangelicals came out to vote. Oregon voted for Kerry and also voted in a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage. I mean, so the problem that the Democrats faced is they didn't have time. They almost didn't have time to come up with a rhetorical strategy to balance the push for gay marriage by the gay rights movement with this other sort of reaction against people's perception that it was asking too much. Gay marriage was asking for too much.
It's interesting that the Democrats kind of put themselves in a box on that one. And the reason is that most of them, and certainly today's Democrats do, support civil unions. They support a separate but equal system. In other words, gay couples should have the same rights as straight couples, but we just won't call it marriage because people think of marriage as a religious thing, not a civil right, even though it's in our code as marriage. That separate but equal system, do you think if they'd made that very clear, that it's separate but equal, that doesn't work because then they think of Brown versus Board of Education, they think of a whole history of separate but equal. I think the Democrats were in a rhetorical box. They supported equal rights for all. They knew Americans were too prejudiced to support equal rights for all, and so they had to backtrack, and that made them uncomfortable. They really weren't saying what they truly believed, and that's what made them uncomfortable on the issue.
I think they should have talked more about what a lot of corporations are doing, which is domestic partner benefits.
So separate and unequal.
No, you see, what a lot of corporations had to do, because I covered this when I worked for a diversity management company, and I was their news person, looking at domestic partner benefits and how a lot of companies started off providing those for gay couples only and not for opposite sex couples who chose not to marry.
Right.
There are a lot of opposite sex couples in this country who've either been married before, don't necessarily want to get married again for whatever reason, but still should benefit as taxpayers and committed relationships from things like domestic partner benefits. For straight couples too.
Well, most people I know that have civil unions have them for straight couples too. How about the idea of saying marriage is a religious institution? The religion should decide marriage. My belief is the state should determine civil unions for everybody, and the church should determine marriage. Is that something that would register with the audience that matters?
I think that if your religious faith, if your religious denomination does not allow for same-sex marriage, then you're going to have to change your denomination. And religion is very important to people.
No. If you say, look, you have the right in your religion to do whatever you want. If you want to say that a Catholic can't marry a Protestant, as the Catholic Church says, that's fine. That is not a legitimate Catholic marriage. If you want to say that two gay people can't marry each other in the Southern Baptist Church, of course they can't in the Southern Baptist Church. But that's going to be, your church is going to have complete control over all marriages. Heck, as far as I'm concerned, if your church wants to recognize polygamy, that's your church. In the civil sphere, we're going to allow a civil union between any two people who are not related, who are adults, and want to have that civil union. We're going to completely separate marriage, religious institution, civil union, state institution. Would that go over with voters?
Probably, but it has to be spoken of correctly. I mean, it's interesting because the gay marriage debate, it was almost like you had, there's a separation of church and state. Here you had church being afraid that state was going to infringe on it.
See, I don't get that, because no one, even the farthest left, was ever arguing that the state should require any religion to do anything.
Well, this is underestimating the power of the conservative vision. You take a fear and you milk it.
Right. I mean, I'll tell you, even the word you use, gay marriage, suggesting that it's something different from straight marriage, when really we're just talking about marriage and whether two people should be able to get married or not. I guess my concern is this, as I read your book and I read about gay people are asking too much, black people are asking too much, women are asking too much, and we want to really reach out to that straight white Christian male who watches football. My concern is that you're not just talking about perception in the Democratic Party, but you're talking about reality, Ann. You're actually asking the Democrats to back off a little bit from their vision of equality for all. How do you address that criticism?
I completely don't agree. This book is also for people of all races who watch football. There's plenty of black traditionalists and black conservatives, which I know freaks out a lot of liberals, but they can't understand a Condoleezza Rice. They can't understand somebody who was raised with certain values that are very in line with some of what the Republicans purport to represent, which is self-reliance, personal responsibility, all of that. I don't think the Democrats should be handing that debate over to the Republicans and letting the Republicans presume to be the party of personal responsibility, self-reliance, and all of that.
Well, wait, let's talk about race, because you have Chapter 13, Black People, the Perils of Disintegration. Mm-hmm. What are you arguing in that chapter?
I'm arguing, Bill Cosby talked a little bit about this. There's an attitude in some corners of black America, because I've experienced myself. I'm an integrationist. I would like to see us, follow Martin Luther King's path of valuing each other based on content of character and not color of skin. And that's a two-way street or a multi-way street. But in some corners of black America, it seems that there's a separatist mentality, us against them. And as somebody who wants to see black Americans have more political power, I'm suggesting that they need to adopt a philosophical state of mind of integration.
Why can't we have it both ways? Why can't a culture, and it's not just black culture, it could be gay culture or women's culture or Italian-American culture or Puerto Rican street parades, why can't you celebrate the heritage that is yours if you're Puerto Rican, celebrate your Puerto Rican heritage, and at the same time celebrate your American heritage? Why do they have to conflict? Why can't you celebrate both?
I think you can. You're going to have to ask the people that see it as us or them, an us or them proposition.
And are those people part of the audience that matters?
Not really, no.
Not necessarily. Okay, We'll get back to this. Folks, I want to encourage you to call in. I'm not the only one that's asking tough questions here. You can too. And heck, if you disagree with me, bring it on. This is what this show is all about. The number is 888-488-MARK, whether you're listening on RadioInsideScoop.com. The toll-free number gets you right here, 888-488-6275. The local number in the Washington metropolitan D.C. area is 571-749-1166. We'll be right back with author A.F. Cook, author of Democrats in the Red Zone, right after this.
Some people in Fairfax County don't know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors.
Your friends.
Or your family.
People who want to share ideas.
Opinions.
Cultures. Lifestyles.
Art.
Sports. Music.
Events.
Entertainment.
History.
Science.
Beliefs.
People who want to learn about television.
Producing.
Directing.
Cameras. Audio.
Lighting.
Editing. Or radio. Talk. Music.
Whatever you think people should hear.
Public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
And it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
Whatever it is.
You can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people.
By the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
We are back to the Inside Scoop. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm talking with author A.F. Cook. She is the author of Democrats in the Red Zone, an independent voter's take on the game of political perception. You can get her book right here at redzonepolitics.com, redzonepolitics.com, and also in Washington, D.C. at the Politics and Prose bookstore. And it should be out just in time for Christmas if you want to buy it for that. And though, before the break, I was asking you about the difference between separatists, if you will, who you condemn in the book, and those that want to practice their culture, respect their culture. There, after all, there are African American traditions. There is a gay culture. There are women's groups, and or Italian American or Irish American. There's a number of groups. I don't think you're knocking any of those groups' individual ethnicities and the things that they practice. How can a politician, let's look at Hillary Clinton, for example, okay? She wants to make clear that she is in support of women's rights and she represents women, but at the same time not alienate men. How do you walk that fine line?
That's a really good question. I think we just have to look at voting patterns. Let's look at, I believe it's South Dakota that voted on referendum not to allow a law to go through that was going to restrict abortion rights. And that law clearly was meant to be a precedent to overturning Roe v. Wade. They wanted to have that law kick up to the Supreme Court and challenge Roe v. Wade. And the voters said, hold on.
But that was actually one of the most strict anti-abortion laws ever seen in any state. I mean, probably if the law had been a little bit more moderate, it would have passed in South Dakota.
Well, all I'm saying is that, there are plenty of women that vote against abortion rights.
Sure.
There are plenty of women that, Democrats need to study conservative Republican women and find out how women can actually vote against, the greater interests of other women. I just think that it's just very complicated. It's not... Women's issues are not just gender-based. In other words, men are interested in what affects women. And you also have to convey to them. So if you have that referendum passing, clearly men voted against that law. So same thing with anything like affirmative action. I'm sure that most of us believe, and certainly the audience that matters, believes in fairness. But they also don't want to have a situation, and some blacks I've spoken with also feel this way, they don't want to feel like they're being given special treatment.
Well, let's talk about fairness and affirmative action, because one of the things that's always striking to me is, and it's the Rush Limbaugh audience, and listen, as someone in talk radio, I happen to know 95% of radio is right-wing, and I would love to have corporations allow people who are in the middle of the spectrum or to the left of the middle to have the same outlets that a Rush Limbaugh does. They don't. That's a problem. But the people who listen to Rush Limbaugh will say, I don't want them, people getting ahead of us or things like that. It's interesting to me, George W. Bush, our president of the United States, went to Yale. Now, I can tell you, and it's not just as a Yale graduate myself, George Bush didn't get there on his grades. And he didn't get it on his extracurricular activities. George W. Bush went to Yale because his father went to Yale. There is something in universities called legacies. You know it well. And it means that people who are rich, generally white, privileged people from the highest spectrum of American society can go to college even if they're a D student. Now, that to me is affirmative action for the wrong people. That's negative action. Don't you think the Democrats could say in response to, well, we don't want to give affirmative action to this poor kid who's worked hard. Why would you give affirmative action to rich white George Bush, who's had a silver spoon in his mouth his entire life, rather than a kid who did come from the wrong side of the tracks and had to work doubly hard because his parents didn't go to college? And I mean, is that an argument that Democrats can make?
And it applies to poor white kids and black and everybody else.
Absolutely. Poor white kids too.
And a lot of Democrats have come up through the legacy system as well.
That's true too.
So we're talking about a class thing here. It's not really a race thing. You're talking about a class issue there. Democrats have to look at their own, their own party for issues that deal with inequality, elitism, and anything like that.
Okay, well, let me give you two examples. Bill Clinton, I think, had a lot of respect for Americans, totally apart from the sexual issues. I think a lot of people I respect the fact that Bill Clinton grew up with a single mother, an alcoholic stepfather, a poor kid in Arkansas, and made it be president of the United States. That's amazing. That's the American dream. Now, let's look at his vice president, Al Gore. I have a lot of respect for Al Gore. I think Al Gore is ahead of the curve on a lot of issues. Al Gore's father was I think a senator from Tennessee. He came from, and of course George W. Bush's father was president. Now, Al Gore can't escape his past. He can't escape his father. He did come up with privilege. John Kerry came up with privilege. But so did the Kennedys and so did the Roosevelts, and they did good for a lot of ordinary people. If you are not in the Clinton situation, if you did grow up with privilege, but you want to connect with blue-collar America, how do you do it?
You have a beer with your plumber.
Have a beer with your plumber.
Yeah. Don't just have them build the addition. Sit down and have a beer with them after. Find out what's going on. Talk about football. Don't tell me you're the party of the people and you support working class voters and you won't even hang out with them once in a while. Hang out with people. Then you'll know how to speak to them. A lot of this book, the reason that I am challenging some of the constituencies in the Democratic Party to pull their rhetorical act together is for their own sake, is for the party's sake. There's, the largely homogenous culturally Republican Party, the party of the white people, some people would call it, doesn't have to work as hard, to convince more people to vote for it. It knows what it's about.
Okay, but how do Democrats... Okay, you make a good point. Have a beer with your plumber. You hear me, Democratic politicians? Have a beer with your plumber. I agree with Ann on that one. But part of my concern is that you're asking people to give up their policies, to give up affirmative action for blacks, to give up equal rights for gay people, to give up equal rights for women. I'm concerned, I got to say, when I read this book, Ann, particularly about women, because as I read this book, I hear, okay, macho men can win elections, wimpy men maybe can't, and women, if they're strong, they're overbearing, and if they're weak, they're too meek. How can a woman take your advice and become president of the United States? Not necessarily Hillary Clinton, a woman.
Condoleezza Rice.
But that's a Republican woman. Give me a Democratic woman.
I'm sorry. Hold on
Dianne
a second.
Feinstein, maybe?
Condoleezza Rice could have been, may still be able to be, NFL commissioner. I do not know why that is, but she appreciates football. She also, what Democratic women need to understand is the Democratic Party, Maureen Dowd, made sure to state in her book, Are Men Necessary?, that Democrats are seen as the mommy party and Republicans as the daddy party. And all I can tell you is that has not been working, and she would agree with me, in the Democrats' favor.
Okay, but see, like Margaret Thatcher, Iron Lady, all right? It seems to me that you can have a woman leader when they come from the right, when they come from the conservatives. How is it that, most women, as it happens, tend to vote more for Democrats than men do on average in America. If you had a Democratic woman running for office, whether it be president, governor, whatever, a leadership position, what advice would you give that woman on dealing with the fact that she is a woman?
Well, I think understanding male voters is very important.
How can she reach out to male voters? And hopefully not in the Italian way. I don't know if you heard about there was a porn star that ran for the Italian parliament.
Yes.
I hope that's not the way to win elections in America. Show some cleavage.
I'm going to come back to football. There are a lot of female football fans in America. We are not on the radar as much as we should be. I would say sit down with your son, husband, boyfriend, whoever, on a Sunday afternoon. Enjoy the game with him. Bring him some popcorn. Leave him alone. Don't try to have a conversation with him about anything, much less your relationship. And you will start to get to understand guy voters. They want it simple. They want it clear. They don't want to have to be asked to make huge changes radically. They want to know if they're going to change, why it's important for them. We have to understand male voters in order to appeal to them. And this is a perception game. It is a perception game. We have to tailor how we present ourselves in order to achieve as big buy-in as possible with as many voters as possible.
You say don't make radical changes. Here you have Barack Obama going all around the country, tens of thousands of people, and you could almost summarize his entire campaign in one word. It's change. The guy is saying, we need a change, and he's getting at least a lot of young people out there. In fact, a mostly white audience is out there supporting this change. Is it that you can't change too fast, or is it that Barack Obama is a better messenger than a Hillary Clinton?
I'll tell you something, and I hate to say this for my feminist women friends, but Barack Obama is a guy. And from
but that's not fair.
It isn't fair. It's terrible.
So he can do things that Hillary Clinton can't do just because he's a guy?
No, it's also because of who he is and who Hillary Clinton is. Look at the style. The reason I mentioned Condi Rice earlier is not because I agree with her politics, but her style. Okay.
The stiletto black heels and the boots?
No. Condi Rice translates as lady versus woman. Now, there is a difference. There is a difference.
She's a lady? I don't know. I think of Condoleezza Rice as I think of her as a woman, a strong woman.
I'm playing devil's advocate a bit here, but I'm simply saying that how you speak, especially male voters are very sensitive, and I say this in the book, they're finicky as Morris the cat. A lot of male voters I spoke to about why they voted for George Bush was, I just like him. They had no other logic than that. I just like the guy.
How can you possibly appeal to that? Men are too simple. How can you appeal to, the guy there, the simple guy?
Got to hang out with him.
Well, what will they tell you? What could Hillary Clinton, now maybe I don't know, maybe she's got too much baggage, but what could she do to reach out to the audience that matters in a way that shows that she can be with the guys? I mean, to be more of a Yankees fan, is that part of it?
I don't know what to tell you. It's, again, getting to know your audience. If you hang out with people who you want to get to know, and instead of telling them what you believe, ask them what they believe and why. I think
go to a factory, ask people what they believe.
Yeah,
go to a football game and ask people what they believe.
Or what do you think about this or that? But don't get them do not try to ask them about anything on a Sunday afternoon in the fall. Do not make that mistake. If you do that, they're never going to trust you again.
Yeah, it sounds like you've learned some of this from experience.
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. But in all these issues, in dealing with the Democrats and the perception, how do you tell the reality from the phony? Okay, you talked about Mark Warner, NASCAR man. People bought it, even though, as far as I know, and I love Mark Warner, I don't know that he was a big NASCAR fan before he ran for governor. Excuse me if I'm wrong, I don't know. But again, Kerry apparently had gone hunting in the past, and the thing didn't work for him. How do you realistically, I wrote on my website something that I don't know that you agreed with. I wrote, how is it that the Democrats can learn to fake blue-collar values when they don't have it? You can't fake it, can you?
No, you cannot.
But George Bush can. George Bush bought a ranch in 2000 in Crawford, Texas. He didn't have a ranch his whole life. Just before he runs for president, he buys a ranch, he goes around, he clears brush, pretending to be a regular guy, and people bought it. Why do they buy it with Republicans and not with Democrats?
I don't know what to tell you. The Democrats need to study this stuff, but mainly hang out with the people that you're having trouble reaching. Really, if you remain in your liberal salons where you're discussing highly idealistic values and wonderful principles and all of this great stuff, and you're not just going down to your local watering hole and rubbing elbows with the people you say you represent, you're going to have a disconnect in terms of how you communicate your values. I have friends in my life who are gay. I live with someone who's African American. I have plenty of friends who benefited from the right to a safe and legal abortion. I support all of these things, but my interest is in seeing the Democrats play a smarter game. The Republicans have been preparing their conservative takeover, if you will, of the political life in our country, at least since 1964, since the Republican convention, since Barry Goldwater. What have the Democrats done to counter the intensity of that vision?
Well, folks, if you want to ask a question, here's your last chance. Give us a call. Tell us whether you think Ann is right or wrong. Ask her your tough questions. The toll-free number is 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275, local number 571-749-1166, or go to the website radioinsidescoop.com if you just want to write your comments. Be right back after this.
This is Mommy's bed.
Already down to the last 15 minutes.
Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up. If you give me a fish.
If you give someone a fish,
You feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learn basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and stir.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
That's good.
Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby.
We are back to the Inside Scoop. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, Mark Levine.
The name of the book is Democrats in the Red Zone, an independent voter's take on the game of political perception. The author is A.F. Cook, and her argument is really that the Democrats may have their policies right, but their perception wrong. And the audience that matters, that middle America that perhaps isn't as, well, dedicated to politics as people like me are, they're the ones who aren't getting it and who the Democrats should help to get it. We have comments on the website, folks. If you don't want to call in, but you want to comment on the website, you can do so at radioinsidescoop.com. I want to show some of those comments here. We have Paul. Paul writes simply, do the job. Democrats are doing everything but the job they were elected to do. That's pretty simple. Mm-hmm. Paul is saying, I think that the Democrats were elected to get us out of Iraq or healthcare, whatever it is. They're simply not doing the job, or they're not conveying that they're doing the job. Do you have a comment on Paul?
Well, I appreciate what he's saying, but that's pretty unfair. They don't have the bodies in Congress to push through major pieces of legislation to bring the troops home just like that. They just don't have the bodies yet. They don't have that buy-in from the great majority of voters that would have given them the majority that they needed. So it's still a little tight. Now, maybe in the next election they'll have that, but that's really up to the American voters to start looking at what their priorities are.
Another comment. This is by Republico Democratic America, who writes, Paul, certainly both sides of the aisle are guilty on that. And then there's a comment here by Skip. Skip points out that when he was in college, the Denver Broncos had a spring training camp at his school. He remembers he saw them all coming at him. It was one scary sight. He writes, the smallest guy was built like a brick house, and they were not at all happy due to the smog. I think that situation was a lot scarier than anything the Democrats have faced recently. What's their excuse? Maybe we should throw them all in front of the Broncos and give it an ultimatum, develop a spine, or be prepared to receive a punt.
Lovely. Well, I'm going to divulge a very important piece of information, which is that I have been a Patriots fan since I was 13. And so good for the Broncos. They're having a tough time this year. Looks like they're not going to make the playoffs. But my point is, the Patriots had a lot of difficulty earning respect in the NFL. The same way the Democrats have had a lot of difficulty achieving victory for big elections. And what eventually happened was they got a coach with a brilliant mind. They got a quarterback who could rally the team so that everybody believed in what they were doing on the field. And they had a good general management, the way Rahm Emanuel arguably did that for the Democrats this last election cycle. Good general manager brings in the right players, in this case, the right candidates. So you had a more varied, there were even some white men with more conservative views who ran for and won some Democratic seats in 2006. Say what you will about the fact that they're white or more conservative, but the fact is they're Democrats and they're filling those Democratic seats. So that was some good general management on Rahm Emanuel's part.
Well, let's talk about the management in this election. They're obviously, Rahm Emanuel, I hope, will do another good job in Congress. But in the presidential race, have the Democrats, in your view, fielded a slew of candidates who can go into the red zone and make that touchdown? What do you think? You can take it one by one if you want.
Well,
Who's the best for that? John Edwards?
I think Edwards is good. I don't know. His hair is too good. Some candidates have hair that works against them. In this case, Edwards' hair is too good, which is very strange to think about. But you see, when you have hair that's too good, you might appeal to the metrosexuals. But the guys are going to be like, hey, get that hair messed up. Get your fingernails dirty.
Is Obama the one to bring the ball into the end zone?
Possibly.
And Hillary Clinton, you're not high on her.
I should be an automatic Hillary fan. I think she's just, there's a lot to appreciate about Hillary. I just think one of Hillary's big liabilities, this is going to sound very superficial, and that's what perception is about, is superficiality, is her tone of voice. She often sounds like she's trying to instruct people, tell them what to do. She sounds very sure of herself. I think she wears her ambition on her sleeve a little too clearly for a lot of people.
Look, but Hillary Clinton, she was top of her class at Yale Law School. She's brilliant. By the way, Bill Clinton was third. Hillary was first. I happen to know that. She clearly does know her stuff. She knows what she's talking about. You want a candidate to give an air of assurance. You don't want a candidate to say, as Fred Thompson sometimes it seems to say, I'm not sure what I believe. I need to study that. That's not good. She has to be sure of herself. And how much of the fact that she's assured of herself and telling voters what she thinks, how much of it is, well, people don't want a woman saying that?
I don't think it's that people don't want a woman. I think it's the right woman.
Well, what could she do differently, or what woman in the Democratic Party do you like better?
I think Hillary, someone like Hillary Clinton, we already know how smart she is. She doesn't need to prove that to us. She needs to show us that she has empathy for common people.
So to be seen more in situations hanging out with ordinary people.
For instance, but this is common across the Democratic
Bill Clinton did that. Bill Clinton famously, at the end of town hall meetings, he'd be up till 2 in the morning talking with voters late into the night.
Bill Clinton, the reason he was so successful, one of the many reasons, was that this is a very smart man who never sounded like he was smarter than the voters. He never sounded like he was talking down to.
How did he do that? Was it the Southern accent? Was it, a bit of a beer belly?
How did Tom Brady have the kind of season he's having? How did Randy Moss come back and from relative, people were saying he was done, he wasn't a good influence anymore, and now here he is excelling on the Patriots. There's something to be said for just that individual, what this country's all about, individual realization. Bill Clinton was that quarterback that comes along once in a while who can really wow the fans.
But can this be taught? Hillary Clinton has the best coach she could possibly have. She's got Bill Clinton. We all know that whatever it is, Bill Clinton has it. He has someone who could relate to the ordinary person. He could be very intelligent, but explain. No one ever thought Bill Clinton was stupid, but at the same time, no one ever thought he was out of touch. He really could feel your pain, and really did feel the pain of the individual. He's the best coach in the world. He's out to make Hillary Clinton president. What can she learn from him, or can she not be taught?
I'm telling you, I think if Bill and Hillary were not husband and wife, I'm not sure who Bill would be supporting. Honestly, that's just my personal opinion as an average voter looking at the situation. I don't think it can be taught. I think people can make accommodations, try to work with their audience, but they need to understand their audience. Instead of wanting so desperately to be president that we can see that, we need to know that you actually know who we are, even if you don't like it.
But doesn't everyone who runs for president want desperately to be president? There's no question in my mind that Giuliani wants desperately to be president. Romney certainly does. You name it. Huckabee, McCain, they all want to be president.
I think there's a lot more pressure on someone like Hillary to go for it, and I think probably that added pressure helps convey that extra ambition. NPR did a story on her constituents in upstate New York, and they interviewed people now. One woman they interviewed was a waitress. She's been a waitress for 30 years, hadn't voted for Clinton in the Senate, and she had some very interesting things to say as a woman.
What did she say about Clinton?
Well, she basically said that it was somehow unseemly for her to seem like she wanted to upstage her husband. And you're looking at very ingrained traditionalist principles here that are very difficult to overcome. Still, this woman said she speaks good for a woman, she looks good, she's sort of toned down.
That's what the woman said? She speaks good for a woman?
Well, I'm not quoting her. She probably speaks well for a woman in any case.
But for a woman, she's saying that that
I'm not sure if she said for a woman, but the point she was trying to make is that for a woman to be in front to try to outshine her man was somehow inappropriate. And it's very interesting.
That person with that point of view, a very anti-feminist, frankly, point of view, always vote Republican?
Again, I think it depends on the woman. I think it depends on the woman running, what they convey. And that's an individual situation.
Now, you say that this can't be taught, but one of the things you were telling me is that the people that politicians have to advise them shouldn't be a certain kind of people. So what can be taught, and who should politicians surround themselves with?
All right, let's say you can't be taught something book smart, okay? You can't get the manual on how to be a more appealing candidate. But what you can do is, again, go hang out with regular people, maybe actually take advice and pay more average people to work for your campaign. Pay them, because they need to pay their bills.
So Al Gore perhaps shouldn't have invited the leadership of the Democrats in 2000 who were trying to tell him how to be. He should have gone to mom and pop at the county store and asked them.
There has to be balance. You may have some very elite, very experienced strategists working for you, but as Joe Klein pointed out in Slate a while ago, Bob Shrum, from what I understand, helped the Democrats lose 9 presidential elections. There is a limit to what elitism and pulling from an elite pool can do for you.
I certainly agree with you, Ann.
Mix it up a bit.
No Democrat should ever hire Bob Shrum again. On that, we are definitely agreed. Tell us, your book is out, Democrats in the Red Zone. I'll show it to you one more time. Democrats in the Red Zone, an independent voter's take on the game of political perception. They can find that at redzonepolitics.com. That's your website.
Yeah.
And who should this book be bought for?
Everybody from 18 to 80 in America. My grandmother's reading it right now, and she really appreciates it. My mother's reading it. Women will appreciate this book. It's meant to be accessible to everybody.
And it's for people who want to reform the Democratic Party to be more accessible to the ordinary person.
Sure, and it's for people that are really annoyed with the Democratic Party for fumbling the perception ball repeatedly, for turning issues like education over to the Republicans. How did they end up becoming the party of giving people vouchers and options to get out of terrible public education districts?
Now you say, just real quick, we only have a few seconds left,
sure,
that you are an independent voter. You've deserted the Democratic Party based on perception only?
Nobody's born an independent. Few of us are born independent. My home team are the Democrats, but they have a lot to prove to me in terms of their strategy, and I want to see them change their political game plan before I'm going to re-register as a Democrat. So I'm perfectly happy being an independent because I like crossover Republicans too.
Again, the name of the book, Democrats in the Red Zone, an independent voter's take on the game of political perception. Author A.F. Cook, and thanks for coming here on The Inside Scoop. It's a very interesting program. Tune in next week. We're going to go behind the scenes in our holiday show and show you how this is done. For more information on The Inside Scoop, check out my website, radioinsidescoop.com. This is Mark Levine, signing off.